Oh, I don't know. I mean, I could have come off maybe a couple cemetery tombstones.
Picture this moment. You're Bob Dylan, the voice of a generation, the man who changed music forever. You've kept your secrets locked away for decades, never speaking badly about anyone, always staying mysterious. But now you're 83 years old, and something has changed. Maybe it's because time is running out, or maybe you're just tired of pretending everything was always perfect in the music world. For the first time ever, Bob Dylan is opening up about the artists who hurt him the most. These weren't strangers or critics. These were people he worked with, trusted, and sometimes even called friends. This isn't a story about jealousy or competition. This is about betrayal, broken promises, and words that cut so deep they never healed. Dylan has spent his whole life avoiding drama and staying quiet when others attacked him. But now, at 83, he's finally ready to tell the truth about 7 artists who crossed lines they should never have crossed. Some of these names will shock you. Others might make perfect sense. But all of them left scars on one of music's greatest legends. Let's start with a story that will blow your mind. It's 1986 in New York City. The Bitter End, a famous little club where legends are born, is packed with people waiting for something special. Bob Dylan was supposed to walk on stage that night for a surprise acoustic show. Just him, his guitar, and a few songs. Nothing fancy, just pure Dylan magic. But then something happened that nobody expected. Someone handed him a small piece of paper with just 3 words written on it. A name. Dylan read it, and his face changed completely. Without saying a single word, he turned around and walked out the back door into the cold night. He never explained why he left. Not to the club owners, not to his friends, not to anyone. But the people who knew Dylan best understood exactly what that name meant and why it still haunted him after all these years. That night tells you everything you need to know about how deep some wounds can go. Dylan wasn't the type to make scenes or cause drama, but certain names, certain memories, could still make him walk away from everything. So who were these 7 artists that could affect him so powerfully? Let's find out. The first name on Dylan's list might surprise you because on the surface, these two seemed like perfect musical partners. Eric Clapton, the guitar god himself, was someone Dylan actually respected for years. They played together, shared stages, and seemed to understand each other's music perfectly. Clapton even called Dylan the greatest poet in music, which was high praise coming from someone that talented. Dylan appreciated Clapton's incredible skills with the guitar and his deep understanding of the blues. For a while, everything seemed great between them. But something went wrong in the late 1970s. Dylan was going through a spiritual phase, exploring gospel music and religious themes in his songs. It was a brave artistic choice, but not everyone understood it. During this time, Clapton apparently had too much to drink one night and made a comment that would destroy their friendship forever. He told a music producer that Dylan was losing his edge, that his best days were behind him, and that maybe it was time for someone new to take over as the king of poetic rock music. And Clapton hinted that maybe he should be that someone. Now, Clapton probably didn't mean it to sound as harsh as it did. Maybe he was just having a bad night or speaking without thinking. But word got back to Dylan, and the damage was done. A recording session that had been secretly planned between the two was suddenly canceled with no explanation. Dylan saw through Clapton's polite, gentlemanly image and realized there was something calculating underneath. In Dylan's world, having another songwriter suggest they should replace you wasn't just criticism. It was the worst kind of betrayal. The friendship was over, and it never came back. The second artist on Dylan's list was someone even closer to his heart, which made the betrayal hurt even more. Joan Baez wasn't just another musician to Dylan. She was his partner in every sense of the word, both romantically and musically. Together, They were the royal couple of folk music in the 1960s. They sang beautiful duets, marched together at civil rights protests, and gave voice to an entire generation that wanted to change the world. When you saw Bob Dylan and Joan Baez together, you were seeing history in the making. But then Dylan changed. In 1965, he made one of the most controversial decisions in music history. At the Newport Folk Festival, he plugged in an electric guitar and completely transformed his sound. He stopped writing simple protest songs and started creating complex, personal poetry that was harder to understand but much more powerful. It wasn't just his music that changed. His whole approach to art evolved, and he became less interested in political messages and more focused on exploring his own inner world. Joan Baez couldn't handle this change. She felt like Dylan was abandoning everything they had built together. She had dedicated her career to activism and social justice, and Dylan's new direction felt like a betrayal of their shared values. Instead of supporting his artistic growth, she tried to pull him back to his old style. She criticized him publicly, telling reporters that he had lost his purpose and become selfish with his art. She made it sound like his evolution was a form of giving up on the causes they once fought for together. For Dylan, this wasn't just a disagreement about music. This was someone who knew his deepest fears and insecurities, using that knowledge to attack his choices. Joan had been inside his world, had seen him at his most vulnerable, and now she was using that intimacy against him. Dylan never fought back in public or wrote mean songs about her, but he did something that spoke even louder. For more than 40 years, he refused to work with her again. Whenever people asked him privately about their relationship, he would just mutter, "She sang for the people. I was singing for myself." Those words tell you everything about how differently they saw their art and their responsibilities as artists. The third name on Dylan's list shows us a different side of how feuds can develop in the music world. Lou Reed was the leader of a band called the Velvet Underground, and he was definitely influenced by the path that Dylan had carved in rock music. Dylan usually didn't mind when other artists built on his innovations. In fact, he often found it inspiring to see new musicians taking risks and pushing boundaries just like he had done. But there was one thing Dylan absolutely could not stand, and that was mockery, especially from artists who had benefited from the roads he had paved. In 1974, Lou Reed gave an interview that crossed every line possible. He said that Dylan had never really meant anything to him as an artist. He claimed that Dylan's famous lyrics were just smoke and mirrors, with no real substance behind them. He dismissed Dylan as someone who had fooled people into thinking he was deep and meaningful, when really he was just pretentious and self-important. Reed suggested that Dylan had pioneered not great songwriting, but just clever ways to sound important while saying nothing at all. This attack hit Dylan right where it hurt most. He had always been sensitive about whether his work truly mattered, whether his complicated lyrics actually meant something or were just showing off. Having another artist publicly dismiss his entire career as meaningless was devastating. But Dylan didn't respond the way you might expect. He didn't write an angry song or give his own nasty interview. Instead, he did something much more powerful. He erased Lou Reed from his world completely. From that moment on, Lou Reed's name never appeared in Dylan's interviews, liner notes, or speeches. Even when Dylan was talking about artists who had influenced music, Lou Reed was never mentioned. It was like he had never existed. The most telling moment came in the early 1990s when a Rolling Stone journalist casually brought up Lou Reed during an interview. Dylan looked up from his cigarette, raised an eyebrow, and simply asked, "Who?" Then he smiled. It wasn't a joke. It was the most complete dismissal possible, louder than any angry song could have been. The fourth artist on Dylan's list took their feud to an even more theatrical level. Frank Zappa was famous for never holding back his opinions, especially negative ones. He loved confrontation and used sarcasm like a weapon. When it came to Bob Dylan, Zappa was absolutely brutal. In multiple interviews during the 1970s and 1980s, he called Dylan's voice a tragic accident. He mocked Dylan's lyrics as pretentious nonsense and ridiculed Dylan's fans as brainwashed followers who thought they were smart but were actually just fooling themselves. Most artists would have ignored Zappa's attacks because everyone knew he was a provocateur who said outrageous things just to get attention. His genius was undeniable, but so was his love of starting fights. Smart musicians learned to stay away from his verbal traps. But Dylan wasn't like most artists. He took Zappa's mockery personally, especially the attacks on his voice, which had always been a sensitive subject for him. The confrontation between them finally happened at a party in Laurel Canyon, a famous area where many musicians lived and socialized. Both Dylan and Zappa were at this casual gathering of artists and producers. A mutual friend spotted them both and thought it would be great to bring them together for a handshake and maybe end their feud. But when the friend tried to introduce them, Dylan stood frozen. He refused to extend his hand or move toward Zappa at all. The air became incredibly tense as everyone realized what was happening. Zappa, who never let awkward moments pass in silence, decided to make things even worse. He raised his drink with a smirk and said loudly, "I hear silence is your best verse." It was a cruel joke that played on Dylan's reputation for being quiet and mysterious. Dylan didn't respond with words. Instead, he simply turned around, walked out the door, and left the party just 10 minutes later. To some people, this might have seemed like an overreaction to a joke, but for Dylan, it was never about artistic criticism. He could handle people not liking his music. This was about basic human respect and dignity, and Zappa had crossed that line with his cruelty. The fifth name on Dylan's list reveals a much more complex and painful kind of betrayal. Leonard Cohen was someone Dylan genuinely admired and respected. He once called Cohen's work the highest level of songwriting, which was incredibly rare praise from someone who almost never complimented other artists publicly. The respect was real and deep, but it came with complicated feelings of rivalry and quiet resentment that Dylan kept hidden for years. Leonard Cohen's rise to fame happened in the late 1960s, right around the time when Dylan was stepping back from the spotlight after a motorcycle accident that changed his life. While Dylan was recovering and staying out of public view, Cohen's mysterious, monk-like presence was captivating the music world. Some people close to Dylan say he felt replaced during this period, like Cohen was filling a space that had been his. Cohen's refined intellectual image made Dylan's wilder energy seem outdated and even childish in comparison. The real wound came from something Cohen said in an interview during the early 1970s. He made a comment about how Dylan's early songs seemed juvenile compared to the work of more mature poets. Cohen wasn't trying to insult Dylan. He was just thinking out loud about how artists grow and evolve over time. But Dylan heard it as a personal attack wrapped in academic language. He felt like Cohen was dismissing his most important work as kid stuff while positioning himself as the more serious, grown-up artist. Dylan never responded publicly to Cohen's comment, and he never wrote songs attacking him. But he also never forgot it. The two men maintained a respectful distance for decades, acknowledging each other's talent, but never becoming close friends. When Leonard Cohen died, fans expected Dylan to write a beautiful, heartfelt tribute that would honor their shared legacy as two of music's greatest poets. Instead, Dylan's tribute was just 3 short, cold lines with no emotion or deep reflection. For Bob Dylan, that empty response said everything about how the old wound had never healed. The 6th artist on Dylan's list represents maybe the most personal betrayal of all because it came from someone who had been crucial to one of Dylan's most important albums. Michael Bloomfield was the electric guitarist who helped Dylan create Highway 61 Revisited, one of the most revolutionary albums in music history. Bloomfield's raw, powerful guitar work was the perfect match for Dylan's new electric sound. Their collaboration wasn't just successful, It was magical, helping Dylan transform from a folk singer into a rock legend. To Dylan, their partnership felt sacred. They had created something together that changed music forever. But after that amazing album, Bloomfield started disappearing from Dylan's world. He turned down offers to tour with Dylan. He stopped coming to recording sessions. Some people blamed his growing drug problems, while others said he couldn't handle the pressure of working with someone as intense as Dylan. But for Dylan, Bloomfield's absence felt like abandonment. He had trusted Bloomfield, depended on him during one of the most important moments of his career, and then watched him vanish without explanation. The real break between them came years later when Bloomfield started giving interviews about their time together. Instead of remembering their partnership fondly, Bloomfield began claiming that he had saved Dylan's career by making him rock. He suggested that he was the real architect of folk rock and that he had given Dylan the edge he desperately needed to stay relevant. Bloomfield rewrote their shared history and made it sound like Dylan would have been nothing without his guitar work. Dylan was absolutely furious when he heard these interviews. In his mind, their collaboration had been a true partnership where both artists brought something essential to the table. But Bloomfield had turned it into a story where he was the hero who rescued a failing folk singer. It wasn't just hurtful. It was a complete betrayal of what they had built together. From that moment on, Dylan never spoke positively about Bloomfield again. He never called him for future projects, and he never acknowledged his contributions the same way. The trust was broken forever. The seventh and final name on Dylan's list might be the most surprising of all because it involves one of the most famous bands in history. Paul McCartney from the Beatles was someone Dylan had known for years. They had been friendly, sharing joints and conversation, and even performing together occasionally. But despite their public civility, Dylan and McCartney were never truly close friends. There was mutual respect for each other's talent, but no real personal connection. Dylan had always preferred John Lennon among the Beatles. He appreciated Lennon's sharp wit, his rebellious attitude, and his willingness to explore darker themes in his music. Dylan saw Lennon as a kindred spirit, another artist who wasn't afraid to challenge people's expectations. But Paul McCartney was different in Dylan's eyes, too polished, too focused on making catchy pop songs, too eager to please everyone. Dylan respected McCartney's incredible musical abilities, but he felt like Paul was playing it safe instead of taking real artistic risks. The final break between them happened in 1987 when McCartney made what seemed like a casual comment to a magazine. He said that Dylan wasn't writing songs that people could remember anymore, suggesting that Dylan's newer, more complex work was too difficult for regular listeners to connect with. McCartney probably meant it as gentle criticism, maybe even constructive feedback. But to Dylan, it felt like a backhanded slap that dismissed his artistic evolution as a failure. Dylan didn't fight back publicly or write angry songs about McCartney. Instead, he took direct action. He suddenly pulled out of a proposed joint tour that had been in the planning stages, giving only vague reasons about timing. But people close to Dylan knew the real reason. In private conversations, Dylan was more honest about his feelings. "Paul writes love letters," he reportedly said. "I write scars." That quote perfectly captures how differently the two men saw their roles as artists. The tension between Dylan and McCartney never fully disappeared. They remained polite when they crossed paths in public, but the warmth was gone. Dylan respected McCartney's massive fame and commercial success, but he never respected what he saw as Paul's lack of artistic fire. For Dylan, real art had to come from a place of struggle and authenticity, not from a desire to make people happy. Looking at all 7 of these broken relationships, you start to understand something important about Bob Dylan. These weren't random enemies or jealous competitors. Every single one of these artists had been close to Dylan at some point. They were collaborators, allies, and sometimes even romantic partners. They had shared stages, studios, and dreams together. In some ways, they were reflections of different parts of Dylan himself, the idealistic activist, the wounded poet, the rebellious innovator. Maybe that's exactly why these betrayals hurt so deeply. When someone you've trusted and worked with turns against you, it's not just about the relationship you're losing. It's about facing uncomfortable truths about yourself and your choices. Each of these feuds represented a fracture in Dylan's identity, a reminder of who he used to be, who he was afraid of becoming, and who he could never be again. At 83 years old, Bob Dylan isn't telling these stories to get revenge or settle old scores. He's not trying to rewrite history to make himself look better. He's simply telling his truth, finally and quietly, with the same haunting honesty that has always made his music so powerful. These broken relationships are part of his story, wounds that never fully healed, but taught him important lessons about trust, loyalty, and the price of artistic integrity. The most remarkable thing about Dylan's revelations is how they show us that even legends struggle with the same human emotions we all face. Betrayal hurts no matter how famous or talented you are. Trust, once broken, is almost impossible to repair. And sometimes the people who know us best are the ones who can hurt us most deeply. Dylan's list of 7 artists isn't just about music industry drama. It's about the universal experience of being disappointed by people we thought we could count on. These stories also reveal something beautiful about Dylan's character. Despite all these betrayals and disappointments, he never became bitter or stopped making music. He never used his platform to destroy other people's careers or reputations. He simply withdrew, protected himself, and kept creating art that moved people around the world. His response to betrayal was to become more authentic, not more vengeful. As we look back on Bob Dylan's incredible career and these 7 painful relationships, we're reminded that great art often comes from great suffering. Every broken friendship, every cruel comment, every moment of betrayal became part of the emotional landscape that Dylan drew from when he wrote his songs. The pain didn't destroy him. It deepened him, made his music more complex, and his insights more profound. Now Dylan has finally shared these secrets with the world, not as attacks on his former friends and collaborators, but as honest reflections on a lifetime spent navigating the complicated world of artistic relationships. At 83, he's old enough to tell the truth without worrying about what anyone thinks. The 7 names represent 7 lessons about loyalty, integrity, and the courage to stay true to your artistic vision even when people you trust try to tear you down. If this story about Bob Dylan's secret feuds fascinated you, make sure to hit that like button right now. These kinds of behind-the-scenes music stories take tons of research and time to put together, and your likes help us know you want to see more content like this. Share this video with any music lovers in your life who might be surprised to learn about these hidden conflicts between some of the biggest names in music history. And definitely subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the untold stories behind your favorite artists. We're always uncovering secrets and revealing the human drama behind the music that shaped our world. What did you think of Dylan's list? Which betrayal surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video where we explore more hidden stories from music's greatest legends.